is the XR Motion Podcast with your hosts, Michael Steinberg and Andrew Hogue.
All right, welcome to the XR Motion Podcast, where we go over everything AR, VR, metaverse, AI, NFTs, you name it, we go over it. Today we have a very excited episode. Can't wait to get started. But before we jump into everything, we have the legendary co-host, Andrew. How's it going, bud?
I'm good, man. I'm excited for today's episode. For anyone who's been following any of Michael's posts on Instagram, it's a nice little crossover from that to our guest today. I know you guys just collabed on a really cool series of posts and stuff. So I'm very excited to chat, and I'm also excited that the days are, I feel like I've been opening the podcast with like random facts about living in New York, just because that's my current state of existence. But dude, days are getting longer, man. I looked out today at 5 p.m. and it was still kind of light out. And I was like, this feels pretty good. I thought it was 3. So my day was kind of messed up. You know, I was way behind on things, but yeah, feeling good, man. Excited.
Yeah, me too. I mean, those long days, it's like the depression is just washing off you. It feels great. It's like getting a shower every day without actually taking a shower.
Exactly.
It's so nice.
I'm always saying that.
So real quick here, we have the amazing as well guest on today. And you guys might have seen him. As Andrew mentioned, we did do a week of dailies together. His name is Will Clark. Woo. Hey. And he goes by, and I always recommend you guys look up the any artist that we have on's work, just so you can get familiar with what they do and create and what they are all about. The information we have here, it is at, and then it is, what do you call that word? Underscore. That's right. Yeah. Underscore. I have COVID, so I have an excuse today. I should have mentioned it. So it's at underscore, and then it's meatball, except it's M, and then instead of an E, it's a 3. So underscore meatball with a 3 instead of an E. So. But really quick, just to give a little introduction here, Will is based in California and is a 3D artist and the owner of Pulsar Animation. With a diverse background in various industries, including web development, package design, and motion graphics, Will has honed his skill and expertise in 3D, and that is the truest thing ever. As the industry evolves, Will has taken a keen interest in exciting worlds of real-time 3D and environment design. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Will Clark. Woo!
Hey.
How's it going, Will?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
And shout out to ChatGPT for writing that
intro. Wait, actually?
Yeah.
Dude,
I was trying to write a bio, and I'm like, it was this morning, I was kind of groggy and tired. I'm like, I hate writing about myself and all this stuff anyway. And I'm like, I
put
in a prompt, and I'm like,
Will Clark coming in with just like, I did quickly trained a model before I came onto the show just to write a bio for me. That's amazing. It's so funny. We keep joking about like, we have canned intros, obviously, as every podcast does. There's a canned intro, and we're just like ChatGPT, brought to you by ChatGPT. But actually today, today,
I was like, write me in like an intro bio with the characteristics below, and I'm like 3D artist, Unreal, and blah 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 blah, right? And then it just like spit it out, and then I did like a couple edits, removed a couple sentences.
Incredible, man. And that is like, done. If you only listen to the first 10 minutes of this episode, I feel like that is actionable information that you can work with. You know, you need to figure out how to get your LinkedIn profile set up. I hate writing about myself too. It's the worst. I hate, especially how like, I feel like early LinkedIn really established that like, let's talk in third person, even though, you know, it's me writing this profile, you know, like it's not a very common thing I'm doing. So I feel like ChatGPT, perfect use case.
If you want to be genuine and have somebody else write you a third person thing, have the robots do it. Yeah. Yeah. That's honestly an amazing start. And that is why I think this conversation is about to be very interesting. So anyways, Will, I'm excited that you're here. For those of us who have seen your work, kind of getting familiar with what you're all about, why don't you, we did our reading of your ChatGPT generated response to, who you are and what you're about. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what you're up to? Yeah, totally. So like the robot said, I'm a 3D artist and like motion designer freelancer. And recently in October, I started, mostly for taxes and trying to grow and all this stuff, started a company called Pulsar Animation Design. But mostly operate as a freelancer doing like everything from 2D animation to 3D animation. But have really started to get into, which is the stuff we did, Mike and I did, which is the real-time Unreal Engine, like 3D environment stuff. So I, run a little freelance business, which is my day job, where I do motion, like for all intents and purposes, I do motion design. And then to pay the bills. And then what I really love doing is this Unreal Engine, real-time 3D art.
That's amazing. And I feel like that's also a narrative that a lot of people I think that's a reality for a lot of people right now, where, Michael and I've talked a lot about this idea of how motion design is sort of an antiquated term because it doesn't really sort of encompass where we are right now with XR and VR and real time and projection mapping and, live concerts. It's gotten way bigger than like the days of I can do kinetic typography in After Effects or something,
Right.
So I think there are a lot of people that are kind of going through that, getting the MoGraph done in the day to day, and then like all your skill set that you're growing outside of that is usually what you're most excited about.
Exactly.
And with that in mind, so you mentioned Unreal. What is your kind of suite of programs? What's your day to day look like?
So I mean, most of my work is After Effects, like the freelance stuff. Mm-hmm. Again, it's After Effects, and still Blender, surprisingly enough, for most of my 3D client work. Although I will download Cinema from time to time and use their tools, which just are easier and better for a lot of the, like, just if you need your pipeline tools like multi-shot rendering queues, I mean all the MoGraph tools, of course. Just getting stuff done fast, I'll download it and do that. But most of my day-to-day is After Effects, really, still.
And how long have you been using Unreal?
Since I didn't touch it until Unreal 5 came out. So that was here. Has it been 2 years or has it just been a year?
I want to say somewhere between 1 to 2 for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I mean, geez, that it's been out that long and it feels like maybe an instant, but at the same time, like a pretty significant amount of time. I mean, you can do a lot of damage learning something for a year or two. So that's awesome. And and I feel like the real-time side of things is obviously the most impressive, like the more demos I see of someone in like a photorealistic viewport and they're moving stuff around and it's not collapsing on itself trying to re-render. It's always exciting to see that stuff. And Unreal is like, I don't know you say Blender and my ears perk up. Unreal, I'm also very curious about, just haven't really made that jump. So I'm curious too, just like, what is your learning? Like, did you decide one day I'm picking up Unreal because, I'm seeing it everywhere and I want to learn it? Or was there a specific set of things you were trying to accomplish? Like, what has your learning flow been getting into something like Unreal?
So a lot of new programs kind of come down to two things that I want to learn. Like, I'm either really frustrated with something that I'm using in a current program. For Unreal, that was like, I've just been waiting for it to be good enough in real time to get past render times. Like I've spent tens of $1,000s on like equipment. Like right now I have a 3090 Ti in this thing. Like the first one I could get that wasn't $6,000 to the pandemic.
Sure. Yeah.
And like I was, to give you an example, like I was working on a project for a client and it was like each shot that was maybe 15 seconds took 4 to 6 hours. And I had like 20 shots to do. And you can imagine like just the process of trying to get this stuff done for a client is insane. God. It's just, okay, I have 3 days of rendering that I have to do. And so
you have to account for in a lot of ways. I mean,
in your
3 days of rendering, assuming that your computer doesn't crash mid render, that, you don't have I mean, the number of things that can go wrong. I've been in the crunch time.
Check to the alpha channel on my
just render. Like the worst. It's so bad. Yeah, but I totally hear you, right? And so real time, in many ways, kind of fills the burden of all, or kind of removes the burden of all that.
And I was just so frustrated. I was just like, man, this just sucks. Like, I just want to do it and render it out and like be good and done with it. Like
Right.
And so I'd been waiting for real time to come out, and that was why I was waiting for Unreal 5, because I was like looking at Unreal 4.27 and all this stuff, and it was like still really good. And that kind of leads into the second reason that I get into new programs, is that I'll like wait on feature sets that I want, but if the UI sucks, I'm just like, it's too ugly. Yeah. I don't want to stare at that every day. And that was the same thing with Unreal. And there was the same thing with Blender before Blender 2.8 came out.
For sure.
I was just like,
yeah, no question.
Ugly.
I mean,
so
the worst.
I do have a question. Well, so I, as somebody who is only dabbled in Unreal and dabbled in Blender, hasn't necessarily reached its max potential. I hear a lot of Blender people saying, oh, Blender has real time. And, so I'm curious, what is that real time? Like, what's the difference between Blenders? I think it's EVs, right? And then EV. And then what's the difference between, would you say, are some of the things you've noticed between EV and Unreal Engine?
It's just quality and speed are the biggest things. So they're both game engines, right? And that's how they're doing this. It's kind of like the where Mac moved over from Intel-based chips and all this stuff, and a lot of companies are moving from x86 is super nerdy, but x86 processing over to ARM processing, which is this like whole cascade of advancing mobile processor. It's the same thing with graphics right now, where people are like, the game engines are getting so good, and it's all, they're trying to run that at like 60 plus frames a second to where they can run it full time. So the difference between Blender and Unreal right now is that Eevee's like a game engine in my opinion, and there's a lot probably more technical that somebody who actually develops this will understand, but Eevee's been around for like a few years and it's pretty good. Like, it's really solid for what it is. But Unreal's like, that game engine has been around since like we were all kids. Like Unreal Tournament, like that's what it's built on. Like Fortnite, it's all built on that stuff. And they've been developing this with the idea of like cinematics for like the last decade or more. And so it's really just like Unreal is just a way better, especially with Unreal 5 and like Nanite and Lumen, like basically faked global illumination and
and that's exactly what I was going to bring up, was the Nanite and Lumen stuff. And I know Nanite and Lumen, and I don't even use them. I mean, I've got Unreal downloaded. I've got demo projects that I've like poked around in. It's on my like checklist of I want to understand it. So I do have, the background being I'm interested in it and I'm familiar with the concepts and the terminology of like a raster based engine versus a, ray tracing engine, which, Unreal you get into and you're like, not only have they like honed an engine, but they now also have these proprietary technologies that are doing things that just other, even if it's the same technology at its core in terms of how it utilizes your computer's, GPU or CPU, like they have just really streamlined like the Nanite and Lumen stuff. I see that and I'm like, why, technically from a technical standpoint, it might not be full ray trace global illumination, but it doesn't matter because it looks as good as any ray trace global illumination engine that you have right now. Octane, Cycles, Redshift. The second that Unreal starts to surpass that, which, Michael, you were saying recently, you've been messing around with like Octane within Unreal, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It was cool. I mean, granted, you do have now, when you use Octane in Unreal, you now have to go into waiting for your frames to render, right? So it's not real time, but it's really amazing because you can see everything in Unreal Engine just natively looking beautiful. And then there's kind of just the Octane button, which, enhances it by 10 to 15%. It's not a lot, but it's enough to kind of give it that little extra cinematic feel that makes you go, oh, that's not a game engine. Like, that's really not, but you do have to wait a long time, but still just being able to work in Unreal that entire time. Upload. I mean, I've been using Nomad Sculpt and sorry, again, my throat, I'm going to be coughing a little bit. But I've been using Nomad Sculpt, and you can quickly get up to, 3 million polygons, right? And sometimes you don't really want to lose that detail, but you sure as shit you can't really mess around with it in Cinema 4D because it's too heavy. But
Right.
you bring it into Unreal and you get to keep all of that detail with all of those polygons, and it runs seamlessly. It is wild. And then you can just click that Octane button, which you can't really do in Cinema 4D without it crashing every few minutes. So it's cool. I'm excited. I've only messed around with it very little, but it is just,
it feels like
window.
As someone who's not
very fun and it's very exciting.
As someone who's not using it, I feel like when I hear stories about and I'm actually about to, we're now flipping the script here. You're no longer a host for the next 15 minutes, Michael, because I want to ask you guys about this daily project that you guys worked on together, and I'm sure you both have different perspectives to kind of contribute to it. But I mean, the overarching narrative I keep seeing is that most of these game engines are Unreal, right? Even if it's something that I don't do final delivery in, right? Like look development, things that, like dialing in materials. It's so, traditionally it's been so awful to have to, like, you render a frame, all right, doesn't look great. You try to use the viewport, but it's a little scratchy. So you make all these adjustments and you wait for another render, and then you look at it and you do your A/B and you're like, oh, like I need to turn the bump back down. I mean, that is just you multiply that out over the scope of a project, and it is so much time that you end up wasting. And so, like, even, for me, the thing I find most interesting, especially as like a huge Blender user, Eevee is really good for me at doing like the stuff I need to do quickly, setting up lights, getting a rough idea of textures, getting a rough idea of, like, global environment positioning and all, HDR stuff. That I totally get it for. I always end up going back and rendering in cycles, mostly because it's what I'm comfortable with. But it's amazing to me that Unreal seems to be like branching out to be this, we're going to work with everything. If you use Octane, if you use, the number of YouTube videos that are like Blender to Unreal pipeline, it's like it fits right in no matter what you're doing, even if you don't consider yourself someone that uses a game engine or needs to render real time for like concert visuals or something. It's still a valuable tool. Which all of that brings me to, I would love to hear about this dailies project that you guys embarked on, and I think it would be useful for people too. You guys are both, I know enough about both of you as artists. You're coming from kind of different backgrounds and you're using different tools. I think it would be helpful for people also to kind of get an idea of what is it like to collab with an Unreal artist, or Will, I'm assuming, did you do rendering and all that in Unreal?
Yeah, so I rendered out Unreal and then did all my processing in After Effects. But yeah,
okay,
all.
And then Michael,
same,
you
like EXRs out of Unreal, same deal.
And Michael, you were providing models and sculpts and
yeah. And I just kind of want to even start off with what kind of led to it, but
please. I think you guys take it away.
I just knew that I really wanted to do dailies again. I'm somebody that if I don't have goals, I don't really accomplish them. That's why dailies have always been so good for me. And I kind of wanted to get into Unreal, and I've been doing sculpting recently. And so I just kind of, and then also we were looking at Isabel, who we had on the podcast recently, and she just did 30 days, 30 dailies in a row, and she collaborated with another artist. And I just thought, that is so fun, and that is so genius, because I did dailies for an entire year, and I'm always by myself, and it's kind of a lonely process, and you're kind of just doing the same thing. So I was like, damn, I would love it to work with somebody or do something. I don't know if anybody's insane enough to do a week. And I just kind of randomly posted it. I think it was in a story. And I just said, would anybody want to do a daily project?
Oh, and Will, you reached out?
And that, Will reached out.
Yeah, it was a story or a post or something. And I left a comment. I'm like, are you doing this with anybody? Like, I'm like, I need
I'm
a
anybody.
project. I'm anybody. Like, let's, like, what do you think? Like, let's do something. What are you thinking?
Yeah. And we had no idea. I mean, that was the floor we started on, was just like no plan. I mean, we did meet, funny story, we did meet at Camp Mograph.
Yeah.
And we were pretty chill there. We were, I think every night we'd wind up meeting and having some drinks together.
Nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, but also such a good, like even as someone who, collabing is like always, you go take any laundry list of things you could be doing better as an artist, and collabing with people is somewhere on the list. Like, it's inevitable that like extending your network from like a professional standpoint makes a lot of sense, but also like learning different things from other artists. It's not a question of like better or worse always. It's just, in the case of you two guys, I mean, using totally different programs, approaching problems probably with very different frame of mind. So you learn a lot that way. But it's also really encouraging to hear that, like, yeah, you also don't have to have a plan. Like, the plan can just be like, let's make some shit for 5 days and see if any of it's cool. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. We'll figure out how to like bridge those two gaps. And actually kind of a good segue too. Like, what was the process? I mean, where did it start? Where did it end? What was the handoff like? How did you guys handle all that stuff?
Well, go ahead.
I mean, you can kind of jump in whenever. I mean, I just want to say too, just kind of even going back onto almost working with another creative artist. I feel like my entire career, I've been doing this for maybe like 6-7 years, like professionally, full-time 5 years. And I don't think I've ever actually worked on just a fun project with someone else. Like, this isn't paid. This is just like for fun and hanging out. I mean, game change. It was so fun. It was just amazing, right? Like, I mean, it was so good. But yeah, so going into it, with those expectations, who knew it could have been horrible, but it really was fun. But yeah, we kind of just started off, and we just kind of said what we wanted to do. And I know I think I said, we both kind of were like, what do you want to do during this week? And what do I want to do during this week? And I know I said I wanted to do a little bit of Unreal maybe, but I wanted to do modeling and sculpting, right? So, and
that was like your area of focus.
Yeah, and then Will jumped in, and you were saying you wanted to do Unreal completely, right? Like you were...
Yeah, well, I wanted to do real-time environments, and environments being like the big thing. And
lush, like a ton of, like, let's populate as many trees and fluid dynamics, all that kind of, the stuff that typically feels heavy on the processing side.
Exactly. And like, I mean, Unreal I've been wanting to learn, just like every time I have an excuse to like jump in Unreal, I do now, because it's like, once you get past all the crap and bullshit of like, oh, there's a billion different settings you have to set up, but once you figure kind of how everything works, it's just way more fun. And especially building environments, it's like Legos with all the mega scans, and like I have a few kit bash packs and stuff that I've been using. And I just done before we started, I just made a little like space scene of a space station. I got like a Kitbash 3D thing and made like this little space station, and I made this like janky planet and posted that up. And I'm like, I want to do more of this. And with the sculptures and stuff, and some of the, like, we used Midjourney for like you use Midjourney for a lot of the inspiration, and it's like all of it was like forest stuff, and we're like, shit, let's just do fucking forest scenes, and I'll do that for a week. And then you're like, I'll do the environment. And then you're like, okay, I'll sculpt and do like the main focus character, like the centerpiece. And then
I'm telling you guys, it's like, it's almost frustrating hearing you go through it too, because it's something that I think I'm struggling with a lot, in terms of just, you do it for long enough, you feel like you're plateauing. What are the things you're going to do to kind of push yourself? It's like very simple. Like everything you just described, it's not, when I go through this process of thinking, what would it be like to collaborate with an artist? Like, in my head, I'm really good at making it seem like a much bigger, a much bigger hurdle than it actually is. It can literally be as simple as two people saying, what are you working on? What do you like to do? What do you want to do for a week? And let's see if we can make it work together. And like, sure enough, you guys, you did it you did what you set out to do in terms of actually getting something done every day. But I'm also curious to hear, like, Will, what did you learn? Did you learn new things about Unreal? Did it get, it seems like you visiting Unreal whenever you get the chance also kind of acts as a way to reinforce what you're trying to learn in the program. What were the things that you got out of the whole process of doing a collab of dailies?
Yeah, totally. And going back on the thing you just said, like, you wondering about like, oh, is it going to be this big thing? Is there going to be a lot of planning and process and all this stuff? And it's like, I've found, and especially found through this, which is like the biggest indicator of anything, was that like, unless you're doing a narrative where you need heavy pre-production, a script, all this stuff, which like definitely requires a heavy amount of work and, pre-production and planning. Like, unless it's that, you don't need that. Like, you just need like, okay, you're doing this, I'm doing this, let's just get it done. And in terms of like Unreal, dude, I learned so much. Oh my
really?
God.
Yeah.
And I was blown away in like 7 days. I was just like, oh my God. Like, I was looking at foliage in this foliage painter. I'm just like, oh, this is like,
so do you think
my head.
You think that you learned
in a day.
Do you think that you learned that much because of the urgency of making it a daily, or do you think you learned that like, I mean, not to dig too deep, but collabing with someone, was it the change in maybe what your daily process is like? If you're obviously the two of you hadn't worked together, was it a perspective thing? Was it just an urgency thing? Like, what do you think the biggest sort of motivator for learning and growing in that week was?
So I think for me, in general, when I'm learning stuff on any program, so how I kind of set it up is I have this project I want to do, and I like kind of gauge like, okay, this is kind of in the realm of something that I could imagine I could actually get done, right?
Sure.
And then I start working on the project and I run into a billion problems, and then I just have to troubleshoot, like brute force troubleshoot through everything. But the nice thing about the dailies, like you said, with the constraint of having to just have something done,
right,
and having an individual, like, not like working on pieces of a project, but having each
like you guys set out
its own project,
right? And the fact that you set out to say like, I'm doing this, you're doing that, so you have, not only do you have a time constraint, you have a specific, I'm responsible for this portion, in your case rendering, in Michael's case, like, modeling, sculpting,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but what it forces you to do is like all those learning steps that you do for a normal personal project, where you're just like troubleshooting through these problems, you just do that. You're doing that. It's like doing reps in the gym. Like, you're doing that 7 days in a row. And so and you'll figure out something on day one, and then on day two, that's like twice as fast. And then on day three, it's like
exercising the muscle.
And then on day four. Exactly. Right.
I want to say, really quick, like Mid-Journey, I think, was the coolest thing to start, because you knew what you kind of wanted to do and I knew what I wanted to do. We typed it in together, and it just merged both of our ideas together. And so we had kind of a clear point where we both wanted to do, and we kind of maybe fine-tune, send our stuff to each other on maybe like what else we wanted to do off that image. And the first day I'd kind of be going, and then by the end of the day, Will was sending me, what he had, and I was like, oh, that's starting to look good. And then, I'd send him the model, and then he'd finish it up. By the last day, it was like 10 a.m. Will was like, yeah, dude, I'm done. Like, this is my insane forest that's like perfectly rendered with fog. Dude, you got so fast, so quick. I couldn't even believe it.
And that's so funny too, because you do get this analogy a lot. I mean, I've encountered it a lot in the 10 plus years that I've been doing this. I've encountered a lot this idea of like, well, creativity is it's a muscle. Like, it's something that you go and you work out, and the more you work it out, the better you are at it. And so and all of that is usually in service of the idea of the more you create, it's not about creating perfectly the first time, it's about creating a lot, and then eventually it gets more and more perfect, right? But it's so funny too, because that analogy, I think, misses this like key thing with like when you exercise your muscles, you need like a ton of rest time. You got to make sure you're like feeding it all the right stuff. And I mean, sure, a lot of that is probably true of the brain. Like, you got to get proper sleep and, be healthy and all that stuff. But at the same time, if in 7 days you're saying that you went from, day 1, you're wrapping things up at like 8 p.m. and day 7, you're like 10 a.m. rolls around. You're like, yep, we're done. Like that is, you would never see that amount of growth or like, even if it's just you feeling more comfortable with going through this process. And yeah, it might be a very specific process in terms of like, let's make a daily and post it on social media. But I mean, all of that comes up. Like if you have to ideate for clients, if you have to synthesize ideas from a bunch of, stakeholders in a project, I mean, all of that stuff becomes super valuable. So, I mean, if you can accomplish what it sounds like you guys accomplished in 7 days, like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I want to say one last thing, and then also just kind of reel it back to kind of just even how you got into the field. But I do want to say that, it was such a, I think one thing that was nice about working with another artist in this, and maybe Will, you can jump in on it too, but I felt like when your work was good, I had to get even better. It was kind of, having the pressure of somebody else you're working with, another artist, kind of really makes you go the extra mile. Like I went, I think, harder working with you than I would with a producer I don't really know or care.
Right.
For some reason, I just kind of elevated my own bar.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, because when I was saying earlier about the motivations for doing well, right? Is it the time constraint? Is it the, your workflow is different? There's also a part of me that like wanted to ask, is it also just, when you're in the presence of other people that are doing the work that you do and they're doing it well and I don't want to say competition because I don't think it's always that. I think it's more just inspiration and motivation that you draw from another artist.
Right. I think it's accountability, really. And like accountability in every sense. So like, Mike, what you're talking about, I felt the same thing too, right? I was just like, you bring this awesome sculpture and like an animation for it too, usually. And, I'd be like, oh shit, like this, like, there was one where it's like, oh, we did this thing and it like needs fur. And I'm like, real-time fur is just like figuring that in a day was like,
I said I was going to do foliage. I'm not going to do fur.
but I was like, dude, but like, yeah. And we were going, I like, wasn't going to do it at first. I was kind of like, oh man, this is crazy. And then I looked at this thing and I did some like test renders in Cycles and Blender with their fur thing. We looked at, and it was kind of the same thing for me where I'm like, I have to do this now. Like,
yeah.
We can't like have this idea and then just bail. Like if it doesn't work at all, we'll bail. But like, it's that kind of accountability too, where I'm like, all right, this sculpture is really good. Like I need to make this like fit in the thing. Like sometimes like the animations would like, Unreal would be bitchy or whatever, finicky. And I'd just be like, well, like, I don't want to like downgrade this and like lose detail in the sculpture, lose the potential for like a little story that we got going on. Like I have to make this work because like this suddenly other guy made this awesome thing.
Yeah,
like, I can't just,
suddenly
like, let him down.
Suddenly the thing you're making is in service of something other than what you've already made, if that makes sense. Like when you're exactly to your point, Will, of like you're in a project and you're responsible for everything. I mean, it's the thing that the second you get outside perspective, they're like, you're being way too hard on yourself. But like when you are just obsessing over not only every detail, but every step and every detail in that step, lighting, rendering, modeling, rigging, animation, rendering, post effects, like you get to the end of that process and you're like, I don't care at all anymore. I got to get like, if it even gets done, I have to get it done. Right. But the second that you involve somebody else, especially if it's someone whose work you respect and who you see as like a contemporary in terms of the kind of work that you're doing, the things you're excited about, suddenly You're like, I have to do this well because I like and appreciate and respect the other artists so much that, if I do it poorly, like, it's really the only person to point the finger at is me,
right.
like, and
God forbid I'm going to be the dick who like lets everybody down. No fucking way.
No way, buddy. Not on my watch. I won't sleep for days if I have to. Yeah.
I was blown away. Honestly, I mean, I went in thinking, well, first, I feel like if I wasn't working with Will, half the models I probably would have called completed about halfway to 75% of the way through. And I pushed that extra little mile on my end. And then B, I honestly thought we were going to do 7 pictures, not 7 full videos. Like,
dude,
man,
good on you, man.
Did you not talk about that?
Yeah. I can't even comprehend
that's like a pitfall of being good at real time, maybe, is like,
yeah.
Everyone's like, look, I know that you could do an animation in kind of the same amount of time you could do a still. So, but I did want to back up, sorry, before we go too off the rails, because I realized we jumped into this dailies thing and there were a lot of other things that I wanted to ask you before. So we might look, maybe one edit is just we take this section and like tack it on the end before the outro, because I feel like we really got in it. But a couple of things. I mean, Mike, I feel like you had a few things you wanted to ask. The other thing, it doesn't need to be the question right now. I do want to get out there too. I would love to hear from Will just a little bit about like getting your footing in the industry. And so it's something that we have this meetup in Brooklyn, and we're very lucky in the sense that like we have a very diverse group of people. We have people that are still in school, finishing their degrees. We have people that are like literally COVID hit and they're like, I want to be a motion designer. And one of the, big pieces of feedback we keep getting, and I agree, it's like when you think back to your early days of doing this, like what the thing was that helped, that you felt was your pivotal moment of like, was it a client or a project? Was it a reel you published that suddenly made you feel like I've done the steps and checked the boxes? So with that in mind, Michael, we can run it back to you if you want to kind of like kick back a little bit on the getting started stuff. Or
yeah, I mean, I think that was the most well put question. I mean, what got you into the field and what got you kind of started? I mean, because it's one thing to start learning a program, but it's another thing to actually like jump in and get involved in it. So if you don't mind just talking about your experience with that. And
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to disappoint a lot of people. I bumper bowled my way into this shit. And like, so back in 2018 and like 4 years before, I worked for a small manufacturing company. And I did all of their branding. I was doing like packaging design. I was doing it was this tiny company. And so I was doing, wearing all the hats and doing all the things. But I had done, for some of the videos, and I'd kind of like, I'd learned this stuff in college. I went to film school, multimedia, all this stuff. And I'd done some like motion graphics and After Effects, where we all start. And I posted a video of just like a little VFX thing I did with like an arrow going around our product and like some product animation on footage, and posted on Instagram. And then an old friend of mine from college hit me up on that post, and he's like, hey, do you I'm running a production company up here in San Francisco. Would you be interested in any freelance work? And I'm like, yeah, why not? That sounds great. Like, I've been designing packaging for 6 months and my brain's leaking out of my ears. So like, that sounds great. And so I did that for a year, and then I went up to visit it, and we're sitting out on Dolores Park doing questionable things. And he was like, do you, just sitting there having a beer, and he's like, do you want to like work full time? I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. And he's like, do you want to move up to San Francisco? I'm like, okay. Like, I was Southern California at the time.
I was gonna say, where were you before?
Yeah. Like Central Coast, Southern California at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah. And then I had there's some things going on at work and stuff, and I called him up, and I'm like, hey, when we were a little like messed up the other day up in Dolores Park, were you serious about me coming up and working for you? And he's like, 100%.
Oh, damn, that's amazing.
And so he poached me, and I moved up to San Francisco up here, and worked in his studio for a little over 2 years, and then went freelance in 2021 and have been doing that since.
That's amazing.
So motion design in that studio.
Yeah.
Strictly like After Effects, a little bit of 3D stuff. I'd like force him to do 3D.
Yep. Been there where I'm like, you have to do 3D because I want to learn 3D.
Exactly. Yeah. Not because he needed it at all.
Yeah. No. Like, look, you're definitely going to leak a little money on this, but it'll be cool. It will be cool.
It'll make all your stuff cooler. Like, let's do 3D.
That's amazing. So it's like, so would you say, I mean, obviously I think having a background in film kind of, primes you for so much. We've talked about this on previous episodes of like, the unifying factor, whatever you're doing, whether it's real-time rendering or 2D or vector art, or you're an illustrator, really the best skill set that never really goes out of style is your ability to tell stories. And, so you're primed in that sense. But it sounds like really, the end all be all is to just start doing it. Like it's just, I mean, the resources, so with that in mind, you said you did a little bit in film school, but like, what were your primary resources for your landing on your feet in San Francisco as a motion designer? And maybe that's not what you're traditionally trained to do. Was it trial by error? Was it YouTube? Was it, School of Motion? I don't know, whatever the buckets were that kind of helped you get where you are.
So it's YouTube.
It's YouTube.
But I've done the school, like I've like given a ton of money to School of Motion. Their stuff's awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't finished any of their courses
because
of ADHD.
And they even tell you before you do it, they're like, this is going to be really hard. And I'm like, nope, I got it. And then I do it. I'm like, this is extremely hard. Like it's challenging for sure.
Can't be bothered. I need I have the attention span of a goldfish. And so I'll do if the video is longer than 30 minutes, I don't
It's not happening.
I just can't do it. Their stuff's so good. I feel bad.
Which is probably why YouTube works so well, where it's like,
exactly.
I'm like,
and how I described before, where I go that process of, I want to do this project. And then I'm just I need that urgency of the problem there to learn the thing. I won't be people are learn the fundamentals. And that's great advice if you have the discipline and the attention span to learn the fundamentals.
And to constantly keep them in mind as you're going through a project and being let me
It's like being in culinary school. They're like, you have to slice and chop 1,000 potatoes. It's no, I'm just going to get good at chopping potatoes as I struggle through all these recipes. It's the same thing with
that's such a good, because I learn, I mean, a lot of this resonates with me. My brain sounds very similar, where it's I learn by being look, I know the 7 animation fundamentals of, whatever. There's a million different videos describing what they are, and
you squash and stretch until
squash and stretch, anticipation. Yeah. All of it. Right. Okay, that's great. But sometimes I'm on a project and I am on YouTube and I'm how to make volumetric renderings in cycles without taking 7 hours. That is the piece of information I need right now. And it's not something that I would arrive to by constantly working on my fundamentals. It's more being I am in a situation where, especially where all of these programs are capable of so much stuff.
Volumetric, you Google it. It's use Redshift. You're okay.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Switch render engines, obviously not an option, but I mean, it's, I agree with you. The urgency of not only getting something done, but the urgency of needing, if you don't know how to do something, needing to know how to do a very specific thing. I don't necessarily need an entire course about specific methods of animation. Sometimes I'm just looking for the 5-second snippet of you got to go in here and you got to change these settings. And if you do that, whatever the information might be, it might not seem like it's got a lot of longevity to it, but that's definitely how I learn as well, where it can be really frustrating too, because you're most of the time kind of banging your head against a wall being what am I doing wrong here?
Right. But I think one of the new things, new favorite types of tutorials. So there's those small snippets for solving problems, right? You just need to get it done. And then after you've done a few projects, you're how does somebody do this? Because I'm just hacking this away. And then I found these the live streams on YouTube, Clinton Jones, Punisher stuff. I watched for environments, learned so much for Unreal about with his stuff. But the long 2-hour streams, I would just be on a plane or something, and I just I download it on my YouTube app and I just watch it. And it's not for I need to solve a problem or something. I'm just what's your process to make this thing?
Right.
How do you go about, and you pick up bits and pieces of the stuff that you need, but you're oh, that's instead of being oh, he envisioned this perfect thing. It's oh, he has a reference image usually and sometimes that he's taking, and he's, does awesome photography as well. But he has this reference image, and then he's okay, I'm going to make that thing. And okay, I got all these Lego pieces and building blocks and all this stuff. Now
Dude,
I'm just going to kind of hack it together.
This might be such an obscure reference. The only thing I probably love as much of everything we're talking about is cooking. So I have that kind of background of liking that, but like it's almost like Chopped. I don't know if you guys know that show, where they give a bunch of chefs a box of like usually very obscure ingredients that you wouldn't usually think of, like how do they fit together, right? And then like the beauty is watching all these people be like, ultimately you can like deduce the fundamentals by watching how they cook with all this different stuff. But it's like it's very similar with the work that we do, where it's like if you're starting out right now, if you're either in college learning about this, or you're someone who's like, there's enough resources I can learn it on my own. I think the most daunting thing is like, where do you start? I mean, it's just like the niches, it used to be niche down, which I totally get, but like now the niche down is it's a long rabbit hole. I mean, do you niche down as a technical director, as a creative director, as an art director, as a, like the rabbit holes are plenty for sure. So it's like, what do you actually focus on? And so I feel like, Will, what you're describing too is like, for me, it's always been more useful to sort of figure it out as I go, because then it kind of also informs to me as an artist, like what are the things that I find useful and that I find myself doing a lot of, and then figure out that's what I need to get good at, as opposed to, trying to reverse engineer it, where it's like, if I had learned about, I don't know, like I've never been big on simulations. Like I've never done a ton of simulation work. I love doing it. I love doing stuff in Houdini, and I love that I picked it up. But ultimately I kind of got to the point where I was like, this is something I'm just not going to niche down in as intensely as people that are really good at simulation work.
That's
like,
exactly what I did the first 6 months of 2021. I spent my entire time learning Houdini, and I'm like, I will be the master of fluid simulations. I'm going to be Jack Sonokor, that I'm probably butchering his name, but like, I'm gonna do this. And like fluid simulations are stupid hard. Like it's the hardest simulation you could do.
Yeah.
And like I got
convincingly. I've gotten plenty of that. I'm like, this looks like PS1 graphics, but like I'm into it, It's
like, and they're cool. Like it's so cool to do it. But I was like, I had one day I did I don't know if it's still on my Instagram, but I did like a Halloween video. And it was basically a pumpkin with like a Michael Myers knife that falls in the top of it, and then blood spews out of the pumpkin. Fun and nice for the kids and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But it was really gross. It was really cool, but my computer crashed 4 times. Like I have it's not the best, but like I have a good computer, like a $8,000 PC.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And I'm just like, and then I was like watching some, Rebel VFX. That's the big Houdini, is the school of motion of Houdini, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the guys talking, he's like, oh, this like example of some show he did on Lost in Space, some big huge ocean simulation. They're like, oh yeah, how'd you do that? Was it on your computer? And he's like, no, we have this render farm that's like 300 CPUs. That took like 30 terabytes of frame of simulation. You're just like, oh my God. Like this is like, unless I'm getting into this is not something I just get to do from my house for like, until all the AI simulation stuff catches up in like, a few years. I had the same thing where I'm just like, dude, I can't, it just hurts.
Yeah. I mean, like can you move a few of those pebbles in the rock simulation? You're like, oh my God.
Well, your nose just starts bleeding.
I mean, it's also like, it's interesting too, because it's like, think about what's been consolidated as artists, doing moving images at all, right? So it used to be an editor and a colorist and a sound mixer were separate entities, right? For the most part, dude, if you're working in Premiere, you can do all that stuff in one. And like, especially if you're a direct to client freelancer, the expectation as they might think they're hiring an editor. They're hiring an editor, a colorist, some rudimentary sound mixing, all that stuff. The same is kind of true of 3D and AR, VR, XR, VFX stuff, where all of these things keep getting further consolidated down, right? Like you're expected to be a modeler and a lighting, do lighting and rendering and all that stuff. The one thing that has not gotten consolidated, I feel like, is simulation, which is why Houdini has had such a moment the last few years, is because like, one, it's incredible at simulation, and I sometimes use just like their remeshing tools because it's the only thing I have on my computer that can handle like millions of polys and not completely shit the bed.
Yeah,
but like
that's how I UV unwrap anything anymore. That's what might be what I use Houdini most for at this point.
Right. And that's useful. And that's like it fits a very specific cog in the pipe, the pipeline that I work in or whatever. But simulation is one of those things that like every project I've done very rudimentary stuff, like smoke sim stuff. It's probably completely incorrect, and anyone who's good at it would look at it and be like, that's terrible. But that's probably the only thing left on a project that if it were like super high value to a client to have accurate simming, I would be like, I'm getting a simulation artist. There's just no
100%.
There's like there's no amount of YouTube videos or School of Motion courses or anything that are going to make me good at this in the amount of time I need to have, to get something done. So
that and sculpting.
Yeah.
Like, kind of bring us back a little bit. Like,
yep.
I don't think I think about sculpting and stuff and like Mike, I don't know if you started with any base stuff, but I know that when you sent files over, it was like sphere, and then there's creature here, and I'm just like, did you start with a ball to make that?
Oh yeah,
it's like, oh my god,
like everything starts with a cube. Yeah, well, a sphere now, but
right.
But
no, sculpting is another thing. Like I quad model everything when I start, and I've done some like Ngon hard surface stuff in Blender with like hard ops and box cutter and all that's great. I've never, as much as I love, and I do think modeling can be really fun. There are some times where it's like the worst thing in the world when you're just not figuring it out.
I'm one of those guys. Like, I can't do it to save my life.
Oh, really? Yeah. but modeling feels so much more organic. I mean, some of the stress of modeling a super big model is like, it's just a lot of clicking on keyboards and moving your mouse, and it can be kind of arduous. So sculpting has always been appealing. I have never picked it up. Like, it just never stuck with me. I think having to retopo anything sounds terrible to me, so I don't like doing it. Most of the stuff I make is like going to get animated at some point, so retopo kind of becomes necessary. But, we've talked to some really incredible sculptors on the podcast. People that are just doing stuff that you're like, I will never achieve that level of detail because I'm not good at sculpting, but I'm just gonna have to accept that. Yeah, that and simming, I think those are two. Well, I think everyone has their niche too, but I mean, at the same time, from a technical standpoint, I think I could hack it in a lot of areas. Those are two areas that I know for a fact I would do terrible in.
Yeah. Well, I want to make a video, hopefully this week, that on using Nomad for sculpting, kind of a beginner's, not necessarily even a course, but just show people how easy it is to get in sculpting and how fun it is.
Is this the iPad app?
Yeah, iPad and cell phone.
Wow.
I use it on the train. In the train, I'm just on my phone listening to music. And even on your phone, I mean, I have an iPhone 12 Max. I could get up to about 2 million polygons. And, you can just go in and do just one tooth, right? Or you could go in and just do, I don't know, eye sockets or earlobes. And this is while you're on the train. And then as soon as you get home, you just send it to your iPad. And your iPad has all of the amazing touch sensors, the pressure sensitivity, so you can do these cool fine lines, and it has as many tools, I'd say, as ZBrush. Not even going to lie about it. Phenomenal. I mean, it is basically just right below ZBrush, and it's 100 times more fun to use. Yeah. That's the craziest thing. It's maybe you send it into ZBrush just to, give it a little bit of polish, but yeah, get Nomad Sculpt. It's $15 a month.
Shout out to Mikey for the first video we did. You did that whole character on your phone, right?
Yeah,
like
I did
90% of it.
Yeah,
on the train, which is like with your finger.
Yeah, because I lost my stylus, so I was so pissed. I was like, "Dude, okay, wait, I don't have my stylus," and we said I'm doing sculpting. Like,
this also
what
tracks,
am I gonna do?
This also tracks because I'm pretty sure Mikey at one point in the last like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, posted on the Discord and was like, "You guys got to check out Nomad Sculpt." And then he painted a suspiciously specific scenario where he's like, have you ever been on a train and you want to sculpt in 3D and you don't have your stylus and so clearly it was in service of the project you guys were working on. That's
Well, I was expecting like some Play-Doh looking, like you kind of told me that before you sent me the output, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be like, like some lumpy Play-Doh looking thing, and it's like this full little, like, it kind of looked like one of these it kind of looked like a pop guy or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, big head, little body, but like this great little like owl sculpture that was like awesome. And I'm like, you did that with your finger on a train, you crazy bastard.
I'm telling you, man, it's so fun when you're on the train and you got an hour to kill just to be doing some 3D work. I don't know of any other 3D work you can do, and I've tried all the apps, and I'm not gonna lie, Nomad is better than Blender, and it's got more tools than Blender. It runs better than Blender. It even has, I'm sure it's fake, but it has like actual rendering you can do with ambient inclusion and lighting, and it even has the depth of field is definitely fake, but it's got more. It's better than Blender.
It fills a need for sure, and
Cinema 4D. That's all I'll say, and it's that, which is insane.
So kind of a parallel. I mean, it's interesting because I see more divergence on these two fields more and more. But like music, music production, live visual production, all that stuff is kind of, I think, very really, it has in a very real way in the last few years really sort of intersected with motion design, concert visuals, music videos, lyric videos, whatever. But Ableton, which is that's what I work in if I do like any sort of serious mixing for projects, or like if I sometimes produce music on the side. Ableton released an all mobile app called Ableton Note that has sort of been like highly praised as like, how do you take a really complex program like Ableton and condense it down and make it, user friendly. And they have a cloud service now where it's like, you can be on the train on Ableton Note and you can sketch out an idea for a beat. And then you go and you open Ableton, and then via the cloud, you can pull that set in and it loads into Ableton like a typical Ableton set. I feel like Cinema is going to start doing that stuff. I mean, Maxon already has like Maxon Moves or whatever. I mean, they have mobile apps too. Forager, so, the more that we see those sort of like, it's awesome that Nomad Sculpt exists. I feel like it's not going to be long before every program is going to have some sort of mobile companion, so that when you're on the go, if you have an idea, like for me, I would love to be able to do material design, like while I'm on the train. I always have ideas on the train, mostly because, especially in New York, the subway trains are just like, it's got dielectric surfaces, it's got like super roughness, and like you can look at it on train and be like, oh, that's like, I have an idea for a material. So I would love to do stuff like that and be able to pass it off to a library that when I get back to my desktop,
so right really now, the consensus is we need to get every app that we use to be able to get 80% of where we want to be on a train.
On a train. It actually just a train. It's if you're in a car, I would actually prefer if it didn't work at all. It's got to be on a train.
Like it'll know if you're on a car, an airplane, or
honestly, Will, that is that's a good distinction between like
train, the L train from Brooklyn to Manhattan.
That is going to be consumed with motion designers and 3D
That's
artists.
Our target market, all right?
So Will is in.
Anybody
you're in San
of you
Francisco.
who takes the train.
You're in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
There is public transport, right? But it's just not like, it's not as ubiquitous as New York.
We have buses.
Oh shit! And you guys have driverless Ubers now, so that's a market. Or do you? I thought you did.
We do, if you're brave.
I feel like I would just not go in. If nobody was like, nope, I'll wait for the next one.
Like you see the Waymo car coming up the street, and you're like, I'll wait till it stops before I cross the street. They're great. Like they're doing some good work. They know what to do. But like, I'm just
not there yet. I'm not there yet.
Like I need some time before I can accept that.
Shit. I had a really good follow-up to all of this. Okay. So two things. Sorry, we're getting a little long in the tooth on this. I know we wanted to do no editing. There's going to be editing on this, I think. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I can go on for like all day. So just let me know when you need.
So
I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying all this.
No, the two other. I am too. Absolutely. The two other things. So one, Will, I definitely want to give you the floor on to talk about Pulsar, because I know that's like a relatively new thing. And then two, I know Mikey, you like to do the future thing, but maybe let's segue. So Will, you've gotten yourself established, you've done some studio work, you've freelanced, you started Pulsar. Would love to hear a little bit more about, what the process of starting that was like, what you look to accomplish, and sort of the structure of Pulsar and where you're taking all that.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, Pulsar is kind of like for me, it's the formalization and next step from freelance, because I'm mainly in the camp of like, I'm not trying to start a studio with employees or do anything like this, but, I wanted to be able to hire contractors, and I wanted everything to be a little more formal. And especially if you do freelance for a couple of years, you kind of realize like, okay, with taxes and everything, like I just need to like kind of make this a little more legit, so that like I'm not like, all of our tax code is stupidly overcomplicated and awful. And so you kind of need to play the game. Yeah. You kind of need to play the game to like win the game, if you will. Not win.
Yeah.
Not like a hustle bro or anything, but like, so it's
to make a freelance business viable, you absolutely have to play I think you have to play the game for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even if it's just, to your point, formalizing so that tax write-offs and you're able to just structure your life in a way that is in service of you being able to work for yourself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it started out as that, and again, I started this in October, so it's brand new.
Sure.
But my goal with it is to, one, continue and do my freelance career, and two, to just be able to hire like really good artists and stuff. Like one thing I really suck with overall is like design in general. Like, and it's almost embarrassing. People are like, you're a motion designer. I'm like, I'm an animator. It's like, I can kind of do design. Like, I'm a great kit basher. That's what I do well. Mm-hmm. Like even my 2D animations, I use VectEasy or whatever, which is like, a big like stock vector, one of those things. And I can like, mash together with like Legos with everything. But like real design, like I'm awful with. And this goes and design in like every sense. So that's why I say like sculpting, like I can't go from, and like sculpting and modeling, the thing I struggle with is I can't go from a cube to like a, mech or like a creature, or like a, person or a plant or something. My brain just, I've tried for years and I want to so bad, but like, I just can't make it happen. And so like being like, okay, we need some like fresh design and stuff. I can go like, okay, or we need a sculpture. I'd be like, okay, I'll hire Mikey and just like knock this out. And, or I'll go to like a friend of mine who's a graphic designer and be like, all right, they'll do all your design, they'll do this thing, and then I'll just animate it and I'll do all the post effects and all that stuff and handle the business side. And so it's kind of just to be able to, honestly, to, solidify my career and,
give you a little more like
all this stuff, and then just to be able to work with more cool people and
give you more agency to give you more agency over your work. I think is such a recurring thing for people. I mean, in any industry, but I mean, one thing I hear from people that have been doing this forever is everyone sort of wants a little more say in what they're doing. And, having something like Pulsar gives you even if it is like you have your permalance or your, recurring clients that you're doing your one-on-one stuff with, but it gives you an avenue to explore new ideas with other artists, or, to just sort of to put everything through a funnel like that. In many ways, it seems like it's not a big deal, but I totally get it. It's like the second you start making those decisions for yourself, you start taking your own work more seriously. You're like, you're, to your point, you're formalized. You've got, you have something you can point to and to say like, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm building.
And kind of like a shift I wasn't expecting when starting the company and doing all this is that you go from being like just a guy, like a craftsman, like a woodworker or something, a guy who does stuff, to like, you have this thing and you're like, well, I need to feed this thing like work, and, you know, I need to like make sure this thing succeeds.
Right. Sustaining
Yeah,
something separate from yourself.
It's like, yes, I own this thing, and like I an owner and an employee, which is super weird, but like I need to sustain this thing and like invest in this thing and grow this thing, as opposed to like, I just need more work.
Right.
And it also, you know, like I've said, it's just, and like you said, it opens up all these avenues for like, okay, well, all these different ways you can build this company, this thing is, you know, working with more awesome people and, you know, making cooler work. Like you're not just like, oh, I want to show off this work I did. It's like, oh, what does my business kind of stand for? What kind of like, you kind of get some more focus, right?
Yeah.
Of like, what am I doing? Why, you know, you're not just like, oh, I'm just going to make some random thing today. It's like, oh, well, like, you know, Pulsar is kind of spacey. Pulsar, the name is the super nerdy. It's the,
and the logo.
Yeah. It's a neutron star, a spinning neutron star with radio and gamma radiation coming out of the other side, which is a pulsar. It spins, and so we see pulses of radiation.
Aren't pulsars? Aren't they also some of the largest structures in the galaxy? Or am I getting that wrong?
Some of the densest.
Densest.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like a neutron star, which is like a pulsar is a spinning neutron star, basically.
Right.
And a neutron star is basically, there's some great Kyrgyz, shout out to them. Their animations and videos are awesome.
Yeah, honestly, it also checks two boxes here. One, we're going to learn about a pulsar, but two, you want some good vector animation.
Yeah, like the best.
You
awesome.
Literally cannot beat it. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically what they say is like when a star collapses, there's either two things that happen. One, it collapses into a black hole and like the inner forces win, or like the forces that push out win, and it turns into a neutron star, or it just blows up. But like, you know, regardless of that, I'm not an astrophysicist by any means. But yeah, I was trying to think of a cool name, and I was actually watching the Kyrgyz video. I'm like, Pulsar sounds cool.
Very cool. And what kind of work are you? I mean, do you have work that you're doing through that now? Are you like, what kind of work are you looking to do? I mean, I'm looking at the site right now. You got your reel, you got some pieces up, but is there anything you're working on? Or
so I'm still in the process of figuring out what I want to do with it. Right now, it's just kind of operates as my freelance business. So I do a little bit of everything, everything from 2D animation, which I don't really show on there. I do a ton of, but you know, 2D logo animation, explainers, all the, you know, bread and butter, whatever. And then I'll do like some 3D product stuff, which is mostly what you see on there, and on my reel. And then in the future, a couple projects that I you know, can't really talk about, but they're in the general realm of like automation. And so doing like mechanical animation and automation is a thing I want to go for. Like the two, like professionally for Pulsar, I want to do like mechanical animation, automation services, that kind of thing. Doing like really cool exploded view.
I was going to say, you've got some, what do you call it? Autonomous vacuum is, I don't know. What do you actually call those? The smart vacuums?
Yeah. Like the little Roomba, the Neato guy.
Yeah. Is that the Neato? Yeah.
Yeah. So doing stuff like that. And then even more so like outside of just consumer stuff, like doing, I've done a few projects now. Again, I wish I could show them and display them, but where, you know, I'll work with a company that's making they make these big box automation, basically fabricating. They're almost like fabricating machines, or they do something very specific, but you know, like making a chip or like you know, basically like a big CNC or something, and you'll like get to, you know, they'll send me a big
CAD
STL
file
or CAD file, yeah, and then I'll make basically like a beauty video for it, where like, you know, it explodes, or like you can move parts around.
Oh,
So like
I love
you can
it.
make this cool like environment, and then things like animate together and then operate.
Dispersion, and then like coming back together. And
Exactly.
I'm literally doing I'm working on a shot exactly that right now. Same thing. I don't think I can really talk about it, but a smart dispenser of a specific type that, yeah, it's like it explodes out and you see, you know, the gears, you see the batteries, you see the motherboard that controls all this stuff. Yeah, I love the attention to detail that goes into that, and I like the idea of like I've always loved the idea of recreating a physical object that's in front of me, you know, recreating it in 3D and trying to capture every specific little detail. It's like the Game of Thrones intro, you know, the really complex like game machine that like, you know, that you're seeing how the gears interact, and you're like, okay, I guess this is like a plausible thing that I could see in real life, maybe.
Right. And like so many of these like machines
cool
and stuff are just like black boxes that you don't know how
right.
they work. And
right.
And by the end of the video, you still don't know how they work. But,
like, but you're like, I have a better idea.
This is cool.
Like, I'm definitely not building this at home. I'll tell you that much.
Right. But exactly, like you get to. I've always been super into like mechanical things. As a little kid, I was into like Beckos and construction equipment and all this stuff.
Nice. I was a K'NEX kid. I mean, I also loved Legos, but you know, K'NEX, where it was like, they were all about like making gears. Also
Bionics.
Bionics.
Bionics. Shout
why
out
haven't
to Bionics.
Yeah, shout out to Bionics right now. And also, like, why don't we have a live action Bionics series yet? I would love a live action Bionics series.
We've been waiting for it.
The next
maybe that's a good. Maybe that's like
we got to get James Cameron on this.
Oh, dude, a James Cameron Bionics series would be wild. That would actually be pretty good. Let's see if all right, we'll see if we can get him on next. But
right, get the guys who did Lego Movie get James Cameron to direct it,
and what's his name from Arrested Development? Why am I blanking? Shit, sorry, man. I should know your name. You did the Lego Batman voice.
Will Arnett.
Will Arnett. We gotta get Will Arnett attached.
Yeah,
and Will
definitely.
Arnett, I'm sorry I forgot your name. Will Arnett definitely listens to this podcast, guys. So I just gotta say to Will Arnett, I'm so sorry, Will Arnett. I love you, man. And actually, this is kind of a nice segue too. All this talk of automation and the like. So usually we like to wrap the podcast with asking about all of the crazy stuff that's going on that seems futuristic and maybe a little dystopian or not, depending on your viewpoint. But all the AI stuff, which I know you guys do with Daily. So, Mikey, if you want to kick that segment off.
Oh yeah! All right, let's do it.
The future.
Oh. Oh, welcome to the future part of the podcast. Sorry, that was the first time doing that audio.
That was the surprise. That's the surprise. Holy shit, that's crazy. All right, cool.
Sick. I love that. So good. There we go. Well, welcome to the future part of the podcast where we talk about all the things coming up next in digital design and animation. And we're just going to talk about everything, and there is no judgment here. You know, we can hate on things, we can like things, and we're just overall speculating. You know, it's just our thoughts today. So there's just open-minded conversations, which I'm excited about. This is one of my favorite parts of the podcast.
Man, you just skipped over the fact that for the first time ever, we have sound effects on this podcast happening live. That blew my mind, dude. That was
Hashtag
really cool.
automation.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want the alarm. Beep, 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 beep.
We'll make a whole list of different sound effects we need. So
amazing.
It's like hold on to your socks, kids. Grab your companion cube and get ready.
Yeah. Dude, you have a side hustle in voiceover work if you don't already. I would love to I would love to hire you for a project. Actually, that's going to be
I got my new mic for this podcast and everything, so I'm ready.
Oh, damn. Okay, look, you'll have two claims to fame. You'll be able to say that you collabed with Michael Steinberg on your Dailies project. And then you could say, I also collabed with the other dude on XR Motion, and I just did a bunch of ridiculous voiceover work for a fake product video.
Dude, I would be so down.
All right,
I can only do two voices though, like old action movie voiceover guy
In
and
a
like
world.
really bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impression.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll A/B test both. We'll see what works.
Sounds good.
But yes, Mikey, kick it off, dude. Sorry, I really stepped all over your really epic intro there.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, it's exciting times. So, but yeah, I guess I want to start off just, I think one thing we didn't talk about, we've been talking a little bit, kind of mentioned briefly, a little bit of everything before, but I want to just ask about VR and AR. What is your experience with it? Have you used it before? And do you like it, or where do you see it being in the future, in 5-10 years?
It's like, all right, do we have another 3 hours to talk?
I know,
about
I know.
So interestingly enough, I helped old boss and a buddy of mine. He was working on some really awesome tech to do locomotion in VR. So I kind of like got into that space like 4 or 5 years or 3 or 4 years ago.
Wow.
And like the VR, AR is definitely like, that's the more palatable technology, right? Like that's just, I think that's going to be more of a thing. That's basically like, it's just waiting on a pair of glasses that doesn't suck. That's really it.
And that people would be like comfortable wearing in public on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's like, it's going to be the Apple Watch of just what you wear and what you do. Right. And it comes with a whole plethora of possibilities to use that. Now VR is interesting because people have been trying to figure out whether VR is going to be a thing since like the 80s. Right.
Yeah.
And like for the longest time it was, or from my knowledge, it was like, okay, the tech's just not there. Like we just don't, like when the first Oculus came out, like it was pretty good. And like, several CESs ago, like there was a few of them where it was like, the new, like I went to a SIGGRAPH where they're like, 1 billion new virtual reality tech, like the 8K virtual reality headset and all this stuff. And we were just waiting for like the right tech to come out. But like now the right tech kind of has, like we have like MetaQuest is pretty good. The Pro that I've heard is pretty good. I've used the like HTC Vive and all that stuff, which is awesome. Like the real-time rendering and like, Half-Life Alyx, like the like qualities there, like all this stuff. And now it's just like, all right, what do we do with this? Like it's the text there is now it's just like, okay, there isn't quite, and I've heard this on some other podcasts I've listened to, but it's like, we don't really need it yet. And so it's hard to get everybody on, unless you're like, I want to play a VR game. Like it's really hard to be like, I don't really need this $800 or $400.
I'm pretty
thing.
sure you are saying something that you said other podcasts too, but like, I mean, I will plug XR Motion here. We have definitely had this exact conversation on this podcast of like, it seems like it's a solution in search of a problem still. There's just nothing. It's not really bringing, well, especially in the context of, as to your point with AR, like AR solves many of the functional things that you would think VR would solve for, VR could technically solve placing a piece of furniture in your room and being able to visualize what that would look like. But you can also do it with your phone.
2 TVs with the Amazon thing, like
to
put it in my room. Like it's totally there. It's totally
to functionally figure out, does it fit in my space? Like that is a problem that people have. They buy things on the internet. It doesn't fit, right? That is a problem that can be solved with make an app on your phone, especially with LiDAR that scans the room, that you get a model to scale, all that, right? But VR, no one's going to your point, no one's going to go buy. I mean, I don't own a VR headset, and it's mostly because I don't feel niche enough on the VR stuff that I'm like, well, one, I'm not rushing out to support Meta at all, which is a whole other thing. But like
Meta is the one spending the billions of dollars to create the problem for that solution.
Right. So I'm in the camp of, would I love to have an HTC Vive system? Would I love to have the Valve Index? Like, absolutely. But like, I'm just not going to go and spend upwards of $1,000 to get that. I'll wait. I mean, it's just not that urgent.
Right.
Yeah. And that's like coming from someone who maybe even has a vested interest in learning about this, learning more about this stuff. I've used headsets. I like it. It's cool. But I think the AR stuff is, just to your point, like such a more compelling sell right now.
Yeah. And VR is like, I think my friend who was starting that company, he still has it, but he's kind of waiting for the right time, I think. But he was doing some awesome work over there. But I think the biggest problem still is locomotion in VR. Like, it's just
did you see Move AI? Have you seen?
No.
I got their beta. So effectively, it's if you have just 2 iPhones, and they can be, I think, the earliest just 2. Well, no, I say that in the sense that, like, very privileged, but like if I buy a new phone, I'm generally like, I just have like a closet full of old electronics, which honestly, my fiance wants to kill me. She's like, you have to get rid of this shit. You're never going to sell this stuff. You don't need your box from your MacBook Pro from 2012, but like, that's just how my brain is. I buy technology all the time, and I'm like, gotta keep the box.
I purged all that stuff like a month ago.
Good for you.
Moving in a few months. And
the Move AI thing,
it hurts, but like, do it. It's good for your soul. Like,
see, I just totally got validated by this Move AI thing, where they're like, if you have I think iPhone 8 is the earliest supported, and you put 2 of them up, they give you like, they tell you how to tape out a room, you put some gaff tape down, you put 2 cameras up, and they have an algorithm that just based on those 2 camera inputs will generate a rig that you can open in Blender, you can open in Maya, Cinema, whatever. The more cameras you have, the better, obviously. But like, that's an amazing. I mean, that kind of future application of technology where it's like, I remember I was bidding on a project just 3 years ago that I was like, how do we get a mocap suit and a mocap system, and what does that do to the budget? And it was huge. I mean, it was like $75,000 to get someone to come out and bring one mocap suit, get us the data we need in the format we need, so that obviously it's like the burden can't be on, if you're running a project, that's a huge burden, to be able to replace that with like, throw a few phones up, or maybe it gets to the point where it's literally your webcam. Like,
have you seen Rococo's new AI stuff?
Mikey, I think we've talked about that, right? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, been coughing. The Rococo stuff is great. I mean, the new app, and they also can take I'm not sure if it's the exact same thing, the video footage directly into motion tracking. It's really cool.
Yeah, I've used my webcam.
And I know they were, one
and
camera.
Solid?
And they were talking about, I think, again, as we were mentioning with VR, just what issues are you actually solving and what's the practical use? With Rococo, I remember when we were at Camp MoGraph, blanking on his name. Sam, yeah, he's always the guy in a lot of the tutorials and commercials you see. Great guy. He just made a good point, and he was saying, okay, well, here's, people might be saying, well, it's not going to be great. What can you do with one camera, right? And he was saying, Fortnite dances. Imagine if you can just have one camera up, and now you have millions of people being able to, record their little dance,
do their own emotes. Unfortunately, that's a
multi-million-dollar biz. I've just
that's
a little motion track. I mean, and that's just like the tiniest thing, and then
right,
and then you can make an NFT in Fortnite and sell it to your friends. Like,
there
you go.
And just even like basic tracking of background characters, or just very simplistic things that you need. You don't have to set anything up. You just push record on your webcam and you're done. And it. Even if they're just kind of moving their arms around to give it a little bit
literally
more life.
already doing that. I'm already doing that. I have a personal piece that I've been trying to work on where it's like, there's just like a very intricate hand gesture. So I have all this reference video of me doing the hand gesture so that I can then drop it as literally a reference image by frame in Blender. And I'm just going frame by frame, trying to like, tighten this thing up. And I'm sitting there being like, wow, I've already recorded the video. Like, if I could just extract the motion data from that, that would be...
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll just say with VR that I wish, there was one program, I feel a little odd even saying it because I'm so unaware of the details. I think it was Adobe, but I don't want to throw shade if it wasn't Adobe. There was one program that allowed you to use VR motion camera data because you can get literally Vive trackers on your feet, your legs, which I have, and your hands motion track beautiful, at least on the index. And a company bought them that would allow you to export it, and they've just literally took it offline, didn't do anything with it. I want to say it was Adobe, just to throw shade at them, but
I wouldn't be surprised.
But yeah, anyway, but I feel like
there was another company. God, what company was it? I know the name of the product. It's called Mars, and this might be completely different, but they're taking the Unreal trackers and making like a whole streamlined suite of like tech and plugins for Unreal, so you can do like virtual production motion tracking straight to Unreal and like camera tracking and all this stuff.
Yeah, that's wild.
And they sell it for like a $5,000 kit, and you just like plug everything in, it works.
I did want to ask you though, Will, Unreal in terms of like fitting in the workflows of something VR, AR, like is there, just as someone who's never used it, is there space for Unreal to be used in, AR stuff? Is there? Yeah.
I mean, I don't again, I got into it because of render times.
Sure.
And like real time look dev, but after getting into it and been like, okay, like I got my, especially over the last 7 days, I'm like, oh, I got a handle on this. Like, and then I'm like, well, what else can this program do? Like, oh, maybe I can make an environment, and it's like, the latest one I was running it at 120 frames a second. It's like, well, then I can make a character in games. Like, okay, I can do that. And then it's like with the AR, I don't know much about the AR stuff and the integrations. I know you can do it.
Right. Like you could project that environment that you've made onto the environment around you if you looked at it through your phone.
Right. And you can,
that's awesome. You
can do a setup for that. I don't know how.
Right. But like the tech,
rabbit hole, but
yeah. I mean, that's the other thing about Unreal is that it's not only, I mean, we've talked about this at other points during our conversation of just like, solves render time issues, can make really incredible cinematics for games, can make games, can do, now if it's like doing VR and AR, it's basically, I mean, one thing even when the shitty UI was there, one thing I loved about Blender is it's kind of always tried to be good at being an all-inclusive package to work in, right? Like you can technically video edit in Blender if you wanted to. I never would, but like you could if you wanted to, right? And I think Unreal, I've seen recently, was it Unreal that recently did like a workspace that looked like motion, basically looked like After
2D,
Effects.
They have a whole pipeline roadmap for getting into visual effects.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting to the point where your hardware is talking to Unreal, and that's wild.
And speaking of Unreal, I mean, I'm excited because I want to grab some of the world's environments you made, Will, and just try and jump in VR with them and just see how. Honestly, it's kind of cool. Like, I feel like I will say if there's one practical use that could be better, I think it is the VR editing in Unreal. I feel like if it was 3 times better, I'd be, if it felt like you were running around almost like, Minecraft, except you have high polygon models and could just start building environments while physically running around and teleporting. Yeah. I'd be doing that all day. That would be so fun, because you can get that physical, like going up the steps, and you really get a whole new emotion. I think it was really funny when somebody, they were talking about a VR game they played and they took the teleporter off. So they had to, and they put actual feet trackers on. So they had to run. And they were like, man, I tell you, like when you have to actually walk and run, those steps turn into real like you look at the distance and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to walk half a mile right now.
Yeah.
Like that's too far away, but I'm going to search around here.
What is that peripheral funny. That's like, it's like the infinite walk. You get strapped into it and it's sort of like, it's stationary, but then there's So like if you're on one of those too, you are physically feeling the I'm walking, take any open world game or whatever. Right. But I actually just go ahead, Will.
For use cases for VR, like Mikey, that's a good point. And just thinking about like some of the worlds that I built, like and especially like kit bashing, like environment building, and like a lot of it's just placing things and readjusting size or like scale rotation and placement, and you're just building Legos at that point, kind of kit bashing all this stuff together. And just being able to be in it, and like I don't have to like move my camera around and then like place something. I can just be like, I can like turn my head and then move scale, put this over here, pop this over here. Does this look good from this angle, from this angle, from this angle?
Yeah.
Like, dude, even if I'm sitting in my chair and I'm like, have to do some stuff there, but I have just some controllers and I can do it all without having to look down at my keyboard, all this stuff. It's like, that would be great. That would be awesome.
Unfortunately, the dual rendering, I kind of want to eventually one day make a VR headset that, this sounds so stupid, but it's not 3D. It's just 1D, but it still feels like you're looking at a single screen. I mean, you are looking at a single screen, but because it's not actually rendering out two different images slightly spaced apart, you'd be able to get higher quality graphics. So for, doing these Unreal environmental edits and other sort of programs, you'd be able to see amazing quality graphics. It just won't be 3D, which I don't know.
Right.
That's a dumb idea, but I think it would be dope.
Or like with the AR, where like if I had my desk and I had all these 3D models on my desk and I just had a couple controllers, or it could track my hands, like a leap motion thing or something. And I could just like, I'm just placing stuff and scaling, like I'm just building Legos, like, right. It's just like, okay, like placing this stuff and arranging stuff, and I can see my whole map, and it's like kind of another, like, again, it's just, there's
definitely a burden of interaction with all the stuff that we use to make things, Unreal, After Effects, Blender, Cinema, Maya, Houdini, like you name it. There's pretty much always a time where I'm like, man, I just am so tired of clicking a mouse and like, literally repetitive strain injuries. I mean, there might be even like a health benefit to if we could figure out ways to make our interactions with computers and devices way less about like clicking a finger, repeatedly and these very micro movements of pointing a little pointer around, which in theory
30 with carpool tunnel. Like dude,
really wild. Oh, I didn't even realize.
I feel it like even right now. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's carpool tunnel from things I looked up, but it gets to the point where I have to use my middle finger to click because my pointer finger hurts so much. Clicking a mouse, how sad am I? Like, I can't click a mouse; it hurts.
Literally next to my my desk, I have like a ton of grip trainers. I have like I got bands that I try. Yeah, stylus, vertical mouse. I've got like 5 mice.
All the stuff, but like, if you could, especially also like sitting down, which is a big thing.
I'm standing right now. I don't know if you could tell. I have a standing desk. That's also a huge.
I have a standing desk, but I took the standing part off of it because I'm lazy. But like, I don't like standing because it like hurts my knees, and I don't like sitting because it hurts my back. But like, if I can move around,
and like, so I just lay down.
These conversations do make me miss like my production days, my days where like I was shooting as much as I was doing any of the post stuff,
right?
Because it was nice to just be like, let me go work, moving C stands, setting up lighting setups, and hauling gear. Sometimes it's not bad for the bot. I mean, I would never want to do that as a full-time job. I've met people that are like 60 years old, have been doing it forever, and they're like, I've had 7 back surgeries. So obviously I'm not trying to do that, but yeah, it can be a little. I think the VR stuff would just be such a cool. I know there are Blender builds specifically built for certain. I don't know if it's a specific headset, but basically like a VR setup of using Blender. I think that's super cool. Sculpting. What's the big sculpting tool in VR? On the Quest.
Oh man, there's the Adobe has one, but I think they switched it at this new conference, and they showcase it. I think it's just 3D Sculpt or something.
3D Sculpt,
you can literally take your headset off and keep sculpting on your computer. The feature wasn't out yet when I tried it, and then Sculpt.
I think it is 3D Sculpt is the one I'm
literally typing it out. I know there's a big one I feel so embarrassed for not saying it, but I haven't for not remembering the name. I know there's Quill, which is just a drawing one. Gravity Sketch. That's the
Oh,
best.
that's the one I'm thinking of.
That's been out for ever.
For a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's Gravity Sketch, and then I know there's Medium, and then Tilt Brush. And
Tilt Brush was the one that I used way back in the day.
That was like the big one, that a lot of people for painting and stuff. It's like the best one to put your friends in or your mom in.
Yeah,
and
that's that's the demo I got, and they're like, draw stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you meant put your mom in as like model your mom in for some reason. That's where my mind went. I was like, oh, okay,
it's cool. The best reference.
You've got to
beautiful.
You got to model.
That's
your
where
mom.
I get my good looks from.
It makes an excellent Valentine's Day gift, or Mother's Day gift.
Yeah,
happy Valentine's Day, Mom.
Here's a 3D model of my mom.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I mean, I guess that's the next holiday coming up. I don't know why I said Valentine's Day, but wow.
I made this in VR on a train for you.
Yeah. Emily, if you're listening to this, I hope you're ready for the coolest Valentine's Day of your life. Here's a 3D sculpt of my mom.
I know one of those, and I feel terrible for not remembering which one it is. But you can do multiplayer sculpting, and I say player like it's a game, but multiple people can come into one environment and sculpt different things and kind of help build the world together. Again, Isabella, they've been doing that for 30 days, pretty much making a 3D model in VR with a few people sometimes and uploading it. It's pretty sick. It's pretty cool. It's nice. Definitely a good workflow, and just being able to flip a model around, it's just, instead of using your finger, you just turn your head. It's so much quicker.
Sorry, really quickly. I just have to tell you guys something. So I looked up sculpt. What did I Google? 3D sculpt before we figured out it was Gravity Sketch.
Yes.
And there's just a random website, a WebGL sculpting app called SculptGL, and I've just been sitting here playing with it, and it's actually it's really good. I don't know what you can do with it, but it's like it's like some Blender levels sculpting, but in your web browser. So there you go. Fun tip.
So we have 2 more questions I want to add. There's I always love we're doing acronyms, and before we get into the big one, I want to just ask your thoughts, especially now. This week has been a bull market in the crypto scene. What's your thoughts on NFTs? Have you used them before? Do you plan on it? And also, while you're answering, I'm so sorry, I do have to use the restroom. So,
okay,
I'll be back.
Yeah. So, like NFTs, yeah, like any good piece of like technology or really anything good, it's great until the bros get their hands on it, and then just ruins every good thing for everybody else.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of, and that was sort of the narrative of the whole NFT market, was it just went from like a cool idea to suddenly a bunch of people maybe laundering money and making a ton of really sketchy transactions and tons of money getting moved.
Because it's really cool tech. Like, it's just really like, especially, I mean, Beeple's whole thing and like kind of the thing he kind of helped kicked off with like digital art. That's really cool. And like, now digital art actually has value, where before, like, it really didn't. Like, nobody, like, there was no way to like, show ownership or anything like you would like a print or like a, painting or sculpture or something. And now there is, and that's really cool. And also just like, I'm a big gamer too. And it's just like, I play too much COD and all this stuff. And it's like, I'll have a skin or something, and then like my friend wants it. It's like, oh dude, why can't I just like send this to my friend? Like, why can't I do all this stuff? Or like anything digital, like just to be able to move things around back and forth and show like ownership, like whether or not you're selling it or not. Is really interesting and really cool. And like, it allows you to do, all the stuff with that. It's just been like the whole financial side of it has just beaten it to death.
Yeah.
And which really sucks, because like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it.
Well, and it's interesting, like that perspective too is so the only reason I feel like I have sort of the advantage of knowing sort of some of the intricacies of like Web3 and everything that encompasses is just because our industry happened to get hit by it in a very like, direct way with the whole NFT craze. But it was interesting because I mean, I had knee-jerk reactions as anyone did. And of course I felt FOMO and I felt like a little burned of just like, damn, I'm kind of struggling sometimes as a freelancer to just get paid what I think I'm worth and is a reasonable amount. And like you're watching people sell, effectively, I don't think it was an invalid perspective to think these are basically JPEGs that are selling for millions of dollars. Like, the valuation in an industry that already is sort of challenged in terms of how you value work in a lot of ways. And the standards are not quite what they are in other industries. That was pretty rough. Right.
Yeah.
So I had that knee-jerk reaction, but look, blockchain technology is not NFTs, and like what a blockchain can accomplish in terms of being able to validate data and track data and understand the passage of a digital, of a digital anything, currency, image, video, provenance for digital assets of any kind is super important, especially in a world where we're like talking about misinformation more and more. We're talking about deep fakes and the advent of all of this technology that is potentially really harmful. I think it can be also limiting to have, to your point, like when something like the NFT craze happens and maybe some of the finance bros get a hold of it and it becomes a totally different thing, and you have FTX and all this other just insane stuff happening surrounding it. It kind of it's annoying because you're like, look, but there's still good stuff here. I mean, there's still something that could be really useful.
Like the technology is awesome, right? Like everything you just described and more. It's just like the stuff's really cool, but it's just been like, it's like, I just want it to be like a thing and working. Like, it's not like, oh, this is like my way to make a bunch of money real fast or something. It's just like, oh, this is a new piece of technology that we can integrate into our daily lives. It just like really enhances a lot of the ways that we handle media ownership. Like you said, with misinformation, I didn't think about that, but just being able to like authenticate things well, and just money in general. Like there's a lot of good stuff we can do with it. We just have to make sure that like these people who suck don't ruin it for everybody else.
Right.
As like,
well, and
as that is to say, it's just like,
it's so funny too, because the perspective shift that I had was when I was reading about the idea of like financial forensics, like, so if there's like a huge high profile case of something that involves tons of like fraud and, there's tons of money, the basis of every one of those cases, like the mob, like how we, track down mob stuff back in the day. Like It was all about finding money and who was making the money and where the money was going. And that's really hard to do in like cash-based transactions. It can be dodgy around like credit transactions and like, bank statements versus ATM, whatever. Like from a financial forensic standpoint, in theory, it should make it much harder to commit any sort of that kind of, to game the system becomes much more difficult, because all of this stuff is like anyone, you, me, can go and look at the public ledger of every transaction that's happened on Ethereum. If you have a wallet address, you can see every outbound transaction, every inbound transaction. I mean, that is like, and it's not just money. I mean, think about anything that trades hands over the internet.
Right.
I watched, there's this guy, Johnny Harris. He's a good YouTuber. He was one of the big people at Vox back in the day that kind of helped kickstart a lot of their designs, or I guess push forward a bit of their trend. And he had a very interesting part about just NFTs and crypto and such. But just a fun fact, I know that when Ethereum switched over to Ethereum 2.0, which kind of didn't make as big of a splash as I was thinking, but literally the power usage for mining went from like 100% to down to 1%. It was essentially the amount of energy as Chile. Yeah. So it was like taking off all the power that Chile uses in a year. It was like that just vanished.
Right.
And which is pretty cool. And I think, if you have more, I do think that back in the day with the NFT things, there was a lot of people complaining about the energy consumption of it.
Right.
So I'm kind of,
and I think
it could be a nice little bump and help for
like
future.
Will, you said, you just mentioned, when you look at it not as a way to make money, not necessarily make money, but as a way to make your millions. I think especially now, I think it's a safe time to say, if you're, at least from my perspective, if you're approaching this kind of stuff, if you're getting into it because you think you're going to make millions, like that ship has sailed, I just don't think we're going to have this sort of like massive, Beeple, like every single celebrity running their own NFT collection, and some of them, granted, we did just have the Trump collection, which
that was wild,
earned a ton of money, but I just think that like that will become more scarce, and so it's like we're kind of in a weird, as we are with a lot of this future stuff, we're in this weird, sort of twilight zone of like, there's a lot of opportunity. It's not going to look like what's been there before necessarily, but I do think that, you're going to start seeing new applications of this kind of stuff. And if you're someone who's, again, like putting the knee-jerk reactions aside and just trying to understand what it is, it's going to be a part of the dialogue moving forward for sure.
Right.
I liked Pedro talking about it when we had him on, and I love the idea of it being more, especially if you mixed it with AR and you could click on somebody and see what kind of art they had, or, just kind of have some kind of an open preference like that. But also just, I do think the utility factor of being able to, if we had one for XR Motion, if you came to a meetup, if you bought one for $1 million, no, I'm just kidding. But, if you could get discounts, or, you could get kind of like these membership perks, and you would have a cool, image that sits in your wallet that just proves that you did get that.
Right. Or that's your ticket in or whatever, right? Like,
yeah. And it's like foolproof. And especially going into concerts and stuff where you're seeing so many transactions and people printing tickets, if you were to get a ticket, I'm surprised like Ticketmaster and stuff hasn't really jumped in on that. But, if I'm getting a ticket off StubHub from a random stranger, and I could actually see the authentication of the original venue, that right there is massive value to me,
Exactly.
And that's a really cool thing.
That's kind of the thing too, like, going off that point, and kind of something I said before, it's basically like, there's been this huge spike in hype and controversy and, all the things that affected us, kind of negatively, and for some very positively, and all this stuff. And I'm really hoping that hype just like kind of drops down, and like, like the general public just kind of stops caring about it. Mm-hmm. And then the people who are implementing these systems, like, video game people, concert people, anything event wise, like you said, like just, smart contracts, all this stuff. Like, it's just like a business tool that people use to help like build platforms and build like, like operations for, for concerts and all the stuff we talked about. And it's just like used like that, as opposed to being like, and the same thing with crypto. It's just like, okay, let's just figure out how to use it as a better currency, how to use it as better tracking, better, like, a better Venmo, a better like wire transfers, all this kind of stuff, for like paying people and all that. Like,
I think that it's so funny because like we keep having these sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't call them like black swan event is not the right term for it, but it kind of feels that way, at least in our industry, that there's just been this stuff that keeps happening that we're like, oh my God, who would have thought that like NFTs would be what they were, right? That Web 3.0 would have such a profound impact on content creation so quickly in the backdrop of a pandemic, right? And then take that and take it to where we are today. Who would have thought that Chat GPT could make AE script, expressions? Like if you want to make an expression, you can ask Chat GPT to make me an expression to wiggle something on the Y position, right? Like that stuff is like, if you had asked me 3 years ago, I would have said maybe eventually for sure. But
right. I'd be like, it's 15 years.
Like it's happening really, really, really quickly. But I will say the only thing, the only reference point I guess I have is the NFT stuff, but I do think what we keep seeing with, the news gets more and more like, oh my God, I can't believe this is the reality. But at the same time, once the dust settles and like maybe this is a media thing and just how we consume stuff, and it's like one day your feed is one thing and then the next day it's all you're seeing is ChatGPT and you're like FOMO to the max,
Right.
I think every one of these things has ended up equalizing into a sort of, well, if you get into motion design or VR or AR or XR, you might use these tools. And if you're one of those people that uses these tools, you can get really good at it. And that's another foray into a career creating, right? But it doesn't, I mean, my job has rewind to the NFT days when it was like, oh my God, is this going to change? My job has not changed at all. My job has changed very little. Like the impact of it is has not felt lasting or profound in any way. And I feel the same way with the AI stuff. Now that we're starting to get to the other side of like even just the image gen stuff, my job hasn't changed. My job has not changed at all. If anything, I elect to use the tool when I want to use it. And maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, your mileage may vary, but
and like who knows when it's going to like take over jobs and stuff, but really I see it as and all the use cases that I've kind of looked into, because I had like, this was a few weeks ago, I'm like, oh God, is motion design done? Like oh shit. And then I looked into it, and like every use case, it's like, if you know what you're doing, it has the potential to make you that much faster. Like even just pulling up reference images, like that would have taken like a couple of days for us to like find like a creature reference, and then you have to Photoshop it into a background that you like, and you have to do that for like every single, that would have been like 3 hours of like pre-production for every
manual labor
day.
yeah
And I felt like they were similar images we used as references, like they were able to be in the same world, and I didn't feel like I was just copying somebody else's Behance alien. It was a mixture of what I wanted to make, and the forest was a mixture of what we want, so.
And it's like this tool that just like, if you know what you're doing in your own industry, especially coding, it's like I tried to make a Unreal script for exporting camera data. No way could I do that.
Like, absolutely not.
And I with ChatGPT, and it like just didn't happen. And
I said the same thing.
Shit,
it's like
if I
there's
had a background in coding, I would be able to knock this shit out of the park.
But like there is that level of complexity. Because I did the same thing. The first thing I did when I saw the A script stuff, because I've written some scripts. I write expressions all the time. I know JavaScript well enough that it translates. So I'm like, okay, I've like probably a slightly better foundation for this stuff. Let me like really push the or same with Blender. I think I asked ChatGPT, make me a series of cubes that are placed on a Fibonacci spiral, right? That like gets smaller based on the index of the point. I ran it crashed Blender. It tried to like call a bunch of functions that didn't exist. Now, if you asked it to be like, make a cube in Blender, there are enough, I don't know, it scraped the internet for what, like Stack Overflow articles to, it's probably published somewhere on the internet, and it's basically a copy paste, but if you push the complexity of it, if you don't have the foundational skills, and maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't, but I guess selfishly, I'm already 31, so I only really need to squeeze another like 25, 30 years out of this.
We don't need much. Yeah, I do feel though that, over a month, I guess now it's getting to a few months. It feels like years with how much has been coming out. But over the past few months, I've kind of came to this interesting realization that I do feel that the better the AI gets, I'm almost not worried about it. I think we're just all going to become art directors, and we're going to use the tools we've learned to kind of shape it into a certain vision.
Right.
And as well, I was kind of thinking, okay, taxes, for example, right? Even if you said ChatGPT could do your taxes, you're still probably going to want a professional to do it for you, to at least verify it and check it out. Even with other ideas, you're still going to want somebody who's been trained in that field for years, especially a human when it comes to creativity, to verify that, that's a good idea. Like a CEO, he's just going to make his logo the size of as big as he can and put text around it, so he's going to want an actual creative to say, no, that's not good, or
right.
yeah, that is good, and
I think there's an interesting point that a lot of people miss. And we'll all be prompt masters in like 5-10 years. That's probably probably how it's gonna go. But like the thing I've been talking to people about when they're like, my friends will hit me up and be like, hey, are you worried about this stuff? Like, what's going on? And I'm like, maybe a little bit, but like at the end of the day, especially what we do is like motion designers, 3D artists, is you have to translate what's in somebody else's head onto a screen. And the way that like your brain works with memory and imagination and all this stuff is like, the argument I would make is that if you could jack in to your head and it would spit, like a CEO could spit out the image. If he did that, if he tried to think of the exact same thing in like 10 seconds later, it would be wildly different. And even to build like try to imagine like this little, way blown out, but this little companion cube guy just like spinning in your head. And it's like, you can imagine it and like, you'll get like a lot of the frames, but it's probably, if you put that onto a video, it probably wouldn't be smooth. Like it'd probably be jagged and janky just because we're not computers, right?
Right.
We're a bunch of neurons hooked together. And so it's like, if we're still working with humans, you have to be able to do that translation, whether it's from your own brain or from somebody else's, from brain to picture to paper to whatever. And so it's like, as good as this gets, somebody still has to do that.
Yeah. Like, and that's so Todd Henry, who's like one of my favorite like authors, has some podcasts called like Accidental Creative. He's written a ton of incredible books, and then really all of them are geared towards creative professionals in creativity, not just in terms of you make images. Creativity exists in a lot of different industries, and there's a lot of different ways to be a creative professional. But he says you are a creative professional if your job is to translate ideas into value. And like everything he talks about is pretty much, that is the cornerstone of it, right? Like I translate
That's a much
ideas.
More eloquent way of putting it.
No. The reason I thought of it is because the first thing you use the word translate. Like right now, ChatGPT AI is good at idea generation, right? And maybe, I guess I've seen some examples where maybe it's kind of getting the concept of how do you make an idea valuable, right? I've seen people prompt it with things like, I'm a motion designer, give me an idea for a side hustle, right? Yeah. And really it's like every Envato article you've ever read, which is like, exactly. Sell your stuff on Envato. I don't know, stock footage, like whatever.
Go to Fiverr.
So it's not really good at, when I go to a company and say, you want a promo, and you guys have never done a promo before, I think we should do it in this style because it's indicative of this thing that you guys do, because I read, that level of like synthesizing ideas and bringing in all these different reference points and knowing the nuance and the social context of I'm working for someone. So it's in service of their idea. That is not something I see any form of the AI as it stands right now being good at. So in that sense, it kind of like sort of made me feel like I returned to sort of the essence of why I got into, I was always someone who was just like, I liked to think about outside of the box ideas and solutions and stuff. And really like I landed on motion design. I'm sure it could have been anything. It could have been theater. It could have been music. It could have been any of those things. Right. And like the process to get to what we're doing, I think the stuff that I feel really good about where I'm at in my career is actually not so much threatened by AI or automation, and all the good advice I've gotten so far has been like, just figure out a way to use it. Like figure out, it's a very cool tool. I'll say that. I mean,
it's like, how can this make you faster?
Right.
Yeah. And I've had this thought, and it was even further validated last night, but I just installed Stable Diffusion locally. I've been using Colab the whole time.
Oh, it's so good when you put it locally, dude.
It's, even with my monster computer, it still runs kind of slow.
For sure.
And the photos, it's not like real time photos coming at you. Now, imagine how many CPUs companies are going to need to render out, one photo takes 30, 40 seconds, and that's not even upscale. That's just a regular thing. Then times that by 60 to get, or 30 to get 1 second. Now times that by another, 60 seconds just to get 1 minute. I mean, that's a beast time of rendering. And then you don't really have any controls to modify it anymore, Right. So it's kind of, and then having it last night and even running it locally and hearing my computer GPU just burn gas, man. That thing was cooking. And I was just like, okay, this is probably going to get expensive soon. I could see companies going into this AI, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's why Google and Facebook haven't dropped their animation yet, because of how expensive that's going to be on their servers. I mean, Chat GPT is a massive cost right now. It's the equivalent of 100
like the CTO
Google
is like
searches per one search. That's just text, Right.
The CTO is like the quote that I keep seeing that I just I love the analogy for it, but it's like the costs are eye-watering. Like if you saw their tech bill for like 1 month, or whatever, like just think about it. I mean, that's got to be like however many GPUs running at 90% capacity all day in a system that's got to be cooled to like, I don't know. I mean, you have to be pumping a ton of Freon to keep something, keep 6,039. I have one 3080 and like I heat my office with it. Like,
I don't even, right? Yeah.
I don't even have a heater. I don't run the radiator in here because I'm like, if I'm working, it's hot. It's like
just render hot, fog in cycles and you'll
for 10 minutes, you're good all day.
So I feel like animation is going to have some pretty big hurdles. I mean, imagine just millions of people getting access to rendering out, 10 minutes. That's going to cost them so much.
I actually do not think we have I would not be surprised. I don't know. Someone's probably done the study, but I would be very curious to know, like, what is the infrastructure that exists? Like, what's the max capacity for concurrent users prompting chat? There has to be a threshold. They've already started throttling the website.
Yeah. So. I can only, it's a hit or miss whether I get to use Chat GPT now, because it'll be like, we're at capacity.
Yeah.
Like it's 50%. And I'm just like, I was like this morning, I'm like, please work. I don't want to write this.
I got to send my bio in.
I don't want to write a bio right now.
I forgot we opened with ChatGPT.
Yeah. And then I opened it and I'm like, sweet. I can have the robots write.
Yeah, I actually have not been able to get in the last 3 or 4 times I've opened it. It gives me the we're at capacity, check back later. It used to just be like I'd have to refresh or like clear the cache and refresh, and it would have me log back in and it was fine. But those days it's been a few weeks now that it's been that fluid.
So. Yeah.
And it's just, I think that's going to hit a tech wall pretty soon.
Resource cost for sure.
We're just going to be like, we need like quantum CPUs or something. I don't know. Like just to handle this shit. We need the AI to invent a better chip so the AI can run. Like,
dude, if the AI ever gets sentient, they're gonna be like, "You guys are blowing it. What are you guys doing?"
Okay,
like
I have a great example for AI. This is a little bit of an offshoot, but I think the best analogy for AI in the future is the Love, Death, and Robots sentient yogurt episode. I don't know if you guys have seen.
Oh that. Yeah. Is that's season 1 or?
Yeah. It is so good for like. It's basically an AI, but it's like, super AI yogurt. And they
when the yogurt took over is the title.
And
of the
they
episode,
take over Ohio, and Ohio's like this like utopian perfect thing for humans. And they're like, they make a plan to like make US out of debt and like a perfect utopia too. And they're like, follow it to the T. And of course they don't. So like we crash into oblivion. And then they like take off into space because they've advanced themselves so much, and they're like, "We're over this bullshit."
Dude, I forgot about. To be honest, I'm looking at stills from the episode. The "Take us to your leaders" in the bowl of yogurt.
Yeah, in the granola or whatever.
So good. No, that's a really good episode.
Like, I don't think it's gonna kill us or do anything. I think it's gonna be the super sentient yogurt. that is just
that's
like,
just like, look, you guys are doing,
but you're a bunch of monkeys. Like, what do you want from us, man?
Yeah.
Like,
you're not gonna listen anyways. So what's the what's
it's
the
like,
point
we'll try. Like, here's the thing, and we're gonna like fuck it up because we suck. And
dude,
yeah.
You know what? If there's one good thing in the last few years, it's Love, Death, and Robots. I am like obsessed with the entire concept of not even just like, I mean, they've gotten great studios and all the, you know, every episode has been a hit in my opinion, but just the concept of like a variety show for animation, you know, that's curated and touches on like interesting topics.
Fun fact, the season 3, the episode where they like go into the caves, the military guys who go into the caves.
Oh yeah,
that's unreal.
Oh
yeah, that's all.
Wow,
tune shading.
There we go. I love
that.
Damn,
that's crazy.
Right.
Also, fun fact: season 1, 2, and I think 3 now, they have the story. So a lot of the stories for each episode were a lot longer, and it got cut down to an animation script. You can buy the books on Amazon, and it has the full story of each episode.
Oh, that's
the episodes that were just animation scripts. They put the full animation script that they went off in the book.
Dope.
And then all of the money goes to the writers, gets divvied up amongst the writers.
Yeah.
How cool is that? Huh?
That's a good coffee table book for sure.
I'll hit you up for the link for that. I'll see if I can find it, but that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I also wrote a funny fact on Facebook just 5 days ago. I said, imagine the adventures our AI overlord is going to have when it leaves Earth. It's gonna have a blast, man. Imagine it's meeting other AI overlords, you know, just crashing in the sky.
It's like, dude, these guys that made me were idiots.
Yeah. It's like
just a bunch of like AIs like meeting up in the galaxy. Like, wow,
like, I'm a bowl of super intelligent yogurt, and these fucking sentient monkeys are just fucking idiots.
I try not to be pessimistic about the future and more just curious. You know, I am genuinely curious. Whichever way it goes, I want to see how it all plays out. I think I'm looking forward to the day that like I want to see what an AI existential crisis looks like. I don't, you know, like what is the thing that's going to break the AI? Not so much like I'm going off planet, but more just like, why was I ever made to begin with?
I think off that, like, one of the funny things might happen is that this super intelligence, has depression. Okay, have you guys seen or read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or seen the movie?
The movie? Oh, yeah.
You know, Marvin the robot, this super intelligent human robot who's just depressed all the time because he's so smart.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's like that's gonna happen, and then the humans are gonna come in and be like, first time, like
you must be new here,
like, and they're like, is this your first time having an existential crisis? You're like, no, not my first time.
Been there before.
Welcome to emotions on Earth.
I've been doing this for 30 years. Welcome to the party, pal. Let's
do this.
Well, guys, I think this was a good wrap up point. Because I got to get more cough syrup for my throat.
Yeah, dude, you need to go to bed, man.
You need to sleep.
No, I got to make some tutorials. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're going to bed, man. I insist.
Yeah, you know what you can do in bed? Use Nomad Sculpt. No,
so you bring your bed onto the train.
Yeah, exactly.
Download Nomad Sculpt.
Well, before we leave, I just want to ask, we're going to ask this question. Well, is there any leaving or last thoughts you have or any projects you'd like to mention that you're working on?
Not any projects specifically, but really diving into I kind of credit this part to being able to work on that 7 days with you. Really got inspired to jump into environment design, like real-time environment design in Unreal. And that's like, other than client work, that's my focus right now. It's just super fun. I'm going to do more space stuff. Been watching Dead Space, or I've been watching people play Dead Space.
Oh yeah.
The remake.
Dead Space 2?
The remake of the first
one. Yeah.
But in terms of final words, I don't know.
Dude, let me know about the space stuff, because honestly, I have some space stuff that I've worked on, and the hardest part I had was like balancing lighting and HDRI stuff, because you get like a space HDR and it doesn't really do anything.
It's tough.
No, it's just a black with speckles. It's like, wow.
But,
yeah, I'm really bad. I look at like stuff from NASA and you're trying to like figure out the lighting and you're like, there's one massive light source, but like somehow
you have to fake and add a bunch of other lights. Like,
yeah,
it's rough. Look at the space post that I did on my Instagram and see if that's like in the realm of, it's just a space station, but see if that's in the realm of what you're doing. But
I will.
Yeah, there's, God, I wish I had like a witty quote or something, man. Now,
said by George Washington.
Something fucking Schwarzenegger said at some speech somewhere. It's like that he quoted from somebody else, and I can't remember, which I really should know this, but for all the business guys out there running their own stuff or starting their own stuff, you want to go freelance. Like, I had a big journey into that, and I'm so happy I did. But like, early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and advertise. Like, just get there and do it. And then for the creative stuff, just bridge the gap. Do a lot of volume, like we did with the 7 days. Like 7 days. You don't have to do 300 days. Like, if you have a couple constraints, like if you have to do 7 forests in a row, you will be stupid good at making forests.
Yeah.
And like advertise your work if you're doing that. And then if you're, for the people watching, if you're trying to get better, like at creative, give yourself a couple of constraints and get in that volume.
Yeah.
Just do a lot.
Definitely reach out to another artist. If you haven't worked with another artist before, just do it. I mean, it was pretty game changing.
I mean, that was pretty, you just put a post and I was just like, I need to do something that's not the crap I've been doing.
Yeah.
People are want to do it. People want to make cool stuff, and you don't get to do that a lot with client work because you're working for these other businesses, which is great. But, if you want to make your own stuff, like collaborate with people, and like you did, that was a perfect way to do it. Just work like hell and advertise, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will, dude. I really appreciate the conversation, and we say this to everyone who comes on the show, and anyone listening. But if you find yourself in New York, hit us up. We owe you a beer at the meetup or something along those lines. And really appreciate you giving us some of your time and sharing your perspective with us.
Oh my God, thanks so much for having me. Like, this was super fun. My first podcast, and this was a blast.
Hell yeah! Glad we could
chatting with you guys has been amazing.
Make it memorable. Good.
And then for New York, I'm gonna move out to Boston later this year, and so I'll fly out to New York.
Oh, and I have not been to Boston. Famously, I have not. I say famously, like my family.
Everybody knows Andrew Hogue.
Everybody knows.
The world waits for his arrival.
Boston, the Red Sox are going to bring you out onto the field. They're waiting for you.
No, I say that because my fiance, her whole family's Irish. My family's Irish. You would think, I don't know. It just keeps coming up that I got to go to Boston. Haven't been. So I'll see you in Boston. You come to New York. Yeah. We'll trade.
I'll be out on the Cape. So not quite in Boston. I say Boston, but I'll be out on the Cape.
Oh, we'll head in. We'll head into Boston because famous. If they'll have the parade ready for me. Yeah, they'll be like, Andrew Hogue finally did it. He finally made it to Boston.
I'll flag you down from the end of the parade. You're like, let's get a beer.
Good stuff. But thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And just really quick self-promotion. We got hats now if anybody wants to buy merch. I know we've had a few people. We've had like 3 or 4 people this week.
My hat is not in here, but
live
it's great.
As of yesterday. Everything is fixed. We had some recalls. It's all good now. So get your stuff if you want any.
Do you guys got like shirts and stuff too?
Do we have shirts?
I'm gonna go buy a shirt. I'm gonna do that.
We got one right here. Yeah. But anyway, Will, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you guys. This has been awesome.